So I'm going to go through my reflection on Wednesday, February 11th. And this was one of the really special days because the different groups presented um, their their projects. And so one of the groups presented on equity literacy. And what was really important here was the importance that leaders can initiate a equity leap by discarding tired institutional excuses for baby steps, like the desire to tiptoe around traditions we know are harmful or avoiding people, offending people who defend these traditions. So, incremental equity initiatives often just paper over the status quo. So it's important that schools be bolder and more strategic. And so, equity literacy shares 4 steps to have this shift. And so it's be more committed, outspoken equity advocates must trust the leaders have their backs, prioritize hiring equity mindsets, reward equity practices, yes, but be cautious because these workers can become de facto counselors. On the flip, there may be too much retention of access to resources. And drop traditional and institutional excuses and take major big steps, right? Now, my group focused on de-streaming, and so one of the things to really think about is what can be done to support the educational success of Black students. And so, what's happening in schools that result in a higher percentage of Black students that are streamed in applied classes? So, systematic barriers exist within the system that disadvantage Black students, and so there's a deficit thinking. Teachers and educators of student abilities, and teachers acting as gatekeepers. Students self-perceptions due to streaming. And as a administrator, what can we do to support the educational success of Black students? Need to continually push the mindset that students are all capable of success. High expectations for all students. Engage in discomfort and have courageous conversations with educators that have a deficit mindset. And then have the resources and supports for educators. So here is the presentation of my group on de-streaming. And and so you can see, for example, um, video from Jason Toe. Um, and so it was not until 2021 that the Ontario government committed to de-streaming. But historically, de-streaming policies have failed at implementation, continuing to produce gaps in outcomes such as high school graduation, post-secondary attainment. So, what is the Ontario Ministry goals? Culture shifts in schools and boards to identify and dismantle system discrimination and structural inequities, increase educator capacity for effective culturally responsive instructions, assessment and evaluation in de-stream multi-level classrooms, and increase student engagement, achievement, and well-being. And so we talked a bit about de-streaming in terms of special education, and just want to quickly summarize Ontario streaming practices produce a number of negative effects due to how early streaming takes place, the use of arbitrary perceptions of student ability as stream placement indicators, and the inflexibility to move between streams, ultimately limiting post-secondary access to students in applied or essential pathways. Another group talked about street data, and what was eye-opening is that um, Black community has been advocating for Afrocentric schools for years, and in 2010 to 11, 40% Black boys were not graduating from high school. Now, once Afrocentric school was brought in the TDSB, 2013 was the first cohort and 93% graduated. So the shift to street data for people of color being able to bring their full selves to a professional setting means that our colleagues need to care about, accept, and welcome our emotions. So if you take a look at the shift to street data, the dominant culture is avoiding emotions, but street data values are honor emotions. Dominant culture pays for action. Street data values pays for relationships. Dominant culture making decisions for power hoarding. Street data values walking with power sharing. Uh, Dominant culture linear, simple, either or. Street value the data values cyclical, dynamic, complex. So the street data method looks at data from the ground up, where educators and leaders act as ethnographers to gather stories, artifacts, and observations from the margins, the families, students, and educators themselves. Now, the book concludes with a section on warm demanders, and they approach students with unconditional positive regard, knowing their cultures well and insisting that students perform to a high standards. Students want teachers who communicate that they're important enough to be pushed, disciplined, taught, and respected. So one of the recommendations is identify a student who is struggling in your class or school and invite him or her to meet with you outside of class. Tell the student that your purpose is to listen and to get to know him or her better so that you can be a better teacher or leader. So that's a strategy for street data is this one-on-one interview. So in terms of impact, the street data has probably had a significant impact in terms of how I approach data. And I mentioned this book to my administrators, and the principal has actually ordered 4 copies, and he is going to provide me with 1 copy of street data. So I'm really happy.